Welcome, Plant Heroes. I'm Plant Hero Call. I own and operate a plant company that does office plants called Interior Plantscape, based in San Francisco. And today I'm going to show you how to be a plant hero for your fiddle leaf fig and help you turn this into this. Now I'm bringing this video to you today because the fiddle leaf fig, or the Ficus Lyrata, is one of the most beloved and sought after plants, but also can be one of the trickiest plants to bring home. So I'll go through everything with you, from where to get one, how to bring it home, how to take care of it, and how to help it thrive. Now, any one of you can be a plant hero. All it takes is actually caring and then also just starting. So go out and get that plant and follow this video. If you think you can grow from this video, drop some fertilizer on that like button, subscribe for more, and maybe share this with a friend who might need some fiddle help too. Let's get into it. Alright, so let's start with where to go to get your new friend. You can do a quick Google search. There's probably 100 plant shops within driving distance of you. Little cute boutique-y ones, or you can go to a bigger plant nursery. But either way, it's a good idea to call ahead. That way you can be sure that you leave with what you're looking for. There's nothing worse than going to a plant shop and having to go home empty-handed. One other pro tip is you could even ask one of the sales associates to send you a picture. That way you know exactly what you might be finding when you get there and how big of a selection they might have. It's good to get an idea of what you're looking for. Do you want a small one to go on a desk, or a medium-sized one to go in the corner of your room or office or something like that? Or do you have a 2-story tall ceiling and you need a big one? That you definitely want to look into in advance, because the bigger they are, the harder they are to find, and also the more expensive they're going to be. But you get what you pay for. This one is one of my favorite plants in the greenhouse, and it's really taught me a lot about growth and optimism, because we've cut it back multiple times, and just look how thick these trunks are. So get started. Now there's 3 main types of fiddle leaf figs. You can get them in this small little bushy variety. Sometimes they have small leaves or big leaves like this one. That will eventually grow into a column fiddle leaf fig. That's this one you see here. It's got multiple trunks coming up, and those are nice for vertical spaces because they tend to grow up. But if you want something that grows out, there's the standard variety. They tend to bush out and spread, and they have this one main single trunk you see here, which they can be awesome, but they can also be a little more tricky because they have one main point of failure. So if you want maybe a little bit of a backup reassurance that, you know, if you do something wrong, the whole plant doesn't go downhill, maybe just one of the stalks, sometimes the columns are a little better. And if you do get a column and you get it in the small version like this, what you can actually do is separate out the different stems. It's as simple as taking it out of the grow pot, kind of pulling apart some of the roots and repotting them into different pots. Now, when you get to the plant shop, I'm gonna want you to look for a quality fiddle leaf fig. So what we're gonna look for is nice strong leaves, none that are really bending downward and saggy. We wanna look for one that doesn't have any blemishes on it. You know, you can kind of see an example right here of a little bit of sunburn, but it could also be many other things that cause that. I'll go into that later. And then another key thing I look for is new growth. You want to make sure that the plant is already doing well on its own, and then you can help it do better. Another key thing to look for when you're looking into buying your first plant is to check the leaves thoroughly. Make sure there aren't any bugs on there. There's a couple main types of bugs that could be on a fiddle leaf fig. There's the white cottony stuff that's called mealybug. There's little webbing under the leaves, that would be spider mites, or if you see little black splotches all over the leaves, that could be thrips. I'll make a video sometime in the future and really dig into all the bug types that could be found. All right, so the first day you bring it home, you're gonna wanna find it a nice sunny spot, not too much direct sun, but definitely not towards the back of a room in the shade, full shade. Definitely also no air vents. You don't want air blowing down on it from above or up from a floor vent. And you're gonna probably wanna wait to water it for the first week or so even. Just let it acclimate. They tend to acclimate a little better when they're dry. And then the next thing I want you to do as a plant hero is name your plant. Because you don't call anything you love an it. So just like Frederick here, if you give it a name, it's going to start the process of getting to know the plant and figuring out what your relationship to it is and how you can coexist in the best possible way. Let's talk a couple do's and don'ts. So definitely do keep it in bright light. You're going to want to make sure that you only water it when it's dry. And don't think you have to repot it just because you've had it for a couple months or it's losing some leaves or something like that. That's just the plant adjusting. You want to leave it in this nursery pot. It's going to help you figure out the watering, make sure that it's actually draining all the way through and drying out as a whole instead of just water sitting in there rotting the roots. That's not what you want. So don't be scared if there's a little adjustment period, because if you do keep it nice and dry and then you water it, it might lose a leaf or two because the conditions it was getting in the nursery are perfect. They're bright, it's getting consistent water, everything it needs. And then in your house, it's not as ideal. It can still totally work, but there might be a little bit of getting to know you period. You're gonna wanna rotate it every 2 weeks or so. Give it about a quarter turn in the same direction every time. That way it's getting light to all of its leaves, and the light can even penetrate into the middle of the plant. If you've got these leaves always blocking that side, it's probably gonna lose those leaves over there and only grow this way. So you'll stop your plant from getting one-sided, and you'll just help it grow all over and live its best life. While we're on the topic of best care and location for your plant, one of the most important things for it is humidity. If you live in a hot, arid climate, you're probably going to want to supplement that with either a humidifier or, every couple days giving it a little mist. I'll show you here. I would recommend misting the underside of the leaves so that the water doesn't pool into the new growth areas. We don't want that to get rotty, but just a couple little sprays like that. All over. You can get all zen with it and have a good time. Don't go overboard though, because sitting water on the leaves all the time is probably not the best thing for it. But anyway, let's talk about watering. Now, I'm using a fun science beaker, but you probably want to get yourself a watering bucket. I prefer bigger ones if you have bigger plants, but if you have a smaller plant, then even a beaker will suffice. Now, the first watering is going to be one of the most important because you don't want to water it if it's at all wet. What you're going to do is feel the soil, definitely get your fingers in there, maybe go 2 inches deep, probably. This one was just watered, so the soil is actually sticking to my hand. If it's a dry, ready for water sort of plant, the soil is just going to fall right off and you're going to feel no moisture in there at all. That's kind of the number one rule, is do not water if you feel moisture. And eventually over time, you're going to get to know the plant and know your watering schedule and know exactly how much water to give it. That's kind of the goal, is to give it just enough water that it totally dries out by the time you're ready to water it next on whatever your schedule is. I would say in a bright, sunny spot, you might want to water it once a week. Give it a good drink, soak it all the way through, and let it dry out by the time you water it next week. In a little bit of a shadier spot, you could probably be every 2 weeks. You're going to want to not give it too much water and go back and check it every couple days. You know, did it dry out yet? Is it still super wet? And if it's wet, back away. What I would recommend, so you can know exactly what's going on inside the container, is to actually leave it in its nursery pot. That way any water that goes through can drain out into whatever decorative container you may have, and you know for sure there's no water down here when you're about to water it. If there is water in there for more than a day, you gave it too much, it's okay, but you should probably figure out a way to dump it out, or even use like a turkey baster or something, and make sure that it has a chance to dry out before you water it again. Now, tap water is okay. I know some people use filtered water, but I would say unless you live in somewhere with undrinkable sink water, you should be fine. You're going to want to make sure that it is room temperature though. Too hot and you're going to shock the roots, too cold and they're just not going to be happy. And then how to water? What my technique is usually, let's pretend this is a watering bucket, but I'm going to pour slow and steady all over the plant to get the whole root bed soaked. And then I'll wait. And then maybe you add a little more. The goal is to keep adding water until you see water start draining down from the bottom of the pot. Once you see the water coming out, you see a little drip there. Let's add a little more. Once you see water coming out, stop. It's okay if there's a little water left over that sits in your decorative container, but you don't want to have an inch in there, and you want enough water so that the plant will drink it over the next day or so and then not be sitting in water, because that's how you'll get root rot. Okay, so you watered your plant. Next thing I want you to do is to watch it. Maybe take a picture of it after the first watering and be able to track what it's doing, because it's going to change week after week, and it's going to give you signs of, hey, I'm doing the right thing, or wait, what you did last week was not good for me, and then you adjust based on that. Let's talk about some different leaf signs that the plant's going to give you. So the first one is saggy leaves. If they start kind of going downward and looking like it's low in energy, it's probably a sign that the plant doesn't have enough light. If the leaves are yellowing and falling off, probably also not enough light, but very much more so, probably too much water. You'll even be able to see some of the stems look rotty and soggy and yellow. These leaves will fall off on their own, and it's definitely a sign that you're doing something wrong. If the leaves are browning, either on the tips, as you can kind of see here, there's a little bit, or in the middle, it can be a signal that it's underwatered actually, or maybe it's got low light, one of the two. But either way, if you're giving it enough water and you know you are, then it's probably a low light sign. Create yourself a little mental checklist and try and diagnose some of these things, or you can always ask us for some assistance. We're more than happy if you send us a picture of what's going on. I'll try and get back with a response or comment or something like that and help diagnose some issues as they seem to be arising. If your plant is losing leaves because of overwatering, it's a good chance that there's root rot in there. And what you're going to want to do is pull it out of the container, inspect all the roots. If any of them are mushy and brown looking, you're going to want to go ahead and trim those out. When you do that, definitely take a sterile pair of scissors. You can rinse them with soap or something, but you just want to make sure you're not introducing any bacteria to the plant that could further harm it. But you go ahead and clip those off, and maybe shake some of the soil off, and then put a little bit of fresh soil in the container and give it a good new start. One other sign that there's something wrong, I showed you a little earlier, but let's take a look at the sunburnt leaves here. So you can see they almost look orange. This is when direct sun is hitting the plant. In our greenhouse here, we've got vents that open up, and sometimes the plant gets hit by direct sun and it is not happy with that. So that's a very clear sign that it needs to be moved back a little bit out of the light. This one had a little sunburn, but it's got a perfect leaf coming out now, so we're good. And one other thing I wanted to show you is if you look at this leaf and you see some of these red spots or freckles on there, that's definitely a sign that the plant absorbed too much water all at once. That's called edema. It's actually the plant cells bursting because they're so full of water, and it usually grows out of it as the leaf grows up, but you want to get that watering schedule down so that you don't have this happening and you got beautiful leaves coming out all the time. One thing I would suggest is actually just using your phone, making a reminder for when to water, because if you keep your plant on a consistent watering schedule, you should be able to get to know it better and avoid a lot of these issues before they happen. So next, once your plant is growing and thriving, let's talk about a little general maintenance. You should be okay with pruning it, because what ends up happening, like I was talking about with this guy, is you prune it and sometimes it could even sprout out 2 new stalks from where you made the cut. You could force it to do that. You can actually cut it somewhere where the stem is still green, like right here. That may make it shoot out 2 new ones, but in general, what you're going to want to do is, at least in my spaces, I like to keep it shapely. So see how this one's kind of growing out a little more this way? Maybe we can cut this one back here. It'll pop out a new stalk and it'll keep the shape of the plant as a whole doing well. But what it also does is it refocuses some energy to the areas that you want it to grow. So with that being said, also don't be afraid to remove leaves. If you've got kind of a funky looking one, usually in the middle, because there's less light in there, you can actually pop the leaf off. Let's see if I can show the camera. But what you do is you grab it by the stem and you push downward and you take the whole leaf off. What you don't want to do is cut the leaves off, because that's going to leave a little nub, and that nub has nothing to do. It's just going to be rowdy eventually, and it's a source for bugs to attack the plant. If you ever do need to maybe trim a not so great looking part off of a leaf, see how there's brown here? Again, clean scissors or pruners or whatever you want to use. This is mainly for aesthetic purposes, but what you can do is kind of cut along the edge of the leaf in a way that looks natural. Most fiddle leaf fig leaves have a little bit of a heart shape to them, so I try and mimic that. And so now we have a leaf with no blemishes on it, and you can go ahead and discard this. And that's how I keep it looking its best possible shape at all times. It's not going to really hurt the plant too much unless you introduce something bad to it, but it helps me care more about the plant when I don't see a bunch of splotches all over it. Once it's been happy for a while, it's inevitably going to shoot some roots out of the grow pot. You can kind of peek into your decorative container and you'll see them kind of peeking out. That's a good time to repot it. Don't do it before. It's just going to shock it and add some unnecessary tension to the situation. But if you do want to repot it, what you're going to do is you get a pot that's about 1 inch or 2 inches bigger than the pot that you have, and put a little layer of soil in the bottom so that the roots have something to sink into. But you don't want to go past about an inch of soil, maybe even less, because if the root ball is sitting too high off of the bottom of the container, the roots are never going to get to the water at the bottom of the container, and you're going to cause some root rot. So you got your bigger container, you add a little soil, remove this one from its container, maybe shake some roots free, let it breathe a little bit. You can drop whatever soil you shake off into the new container, and then there will be a gap around the outside of the container, and you can use some extra soil to fill that gap, and then add a little layer on the top just to give it a whole fresh home all around. And as far as soil goes, regular garden soil is just fine. If you want, you could mix in a little bit of cactus soil just so that it drains better, but in general you don't want to use peat moss or anything that's going to hold the moisture too much, because that's going to cause the roots to rot without you even overwater. Alright, so we already covered a little bit of pruning and leaf shaping, but something else you're going to want to watch out for is dust on the leaves. Imagine each one of these leaves is like a little solar panel, and if it has enough of a layer of dust on it, it's not going to get any of the light it needs to photosynthesize and thrive. But then also, the leaves actually are how the plant breathes. Every little surface of the leaf has a cell that switches out oxygen and carbon dioxide, and if you cover the surface of the leaf or you let it get covered with dust, the plant's not going to be able to breathe, and it's definitely going to suffocate and go downhill. So one easy way to do that is take any sort of a duster. I like these microfiber dusters because they don't get the dust everywhere, but you're going to want to support the leaf down here and wipe every leaf like this. Just take your time, and if you do that often, you won't actually have to use any sort of cleaning solution. But if you do want to, normal dish soap could be fine, but this is what the pros use, Leaf Tech. And this is a little bit of a cleaning solution. It doesn't have any real soap in it, and it doesn't give much of a shine to the leaves, but what it does is it is like a nice organic wash. So what I would do is I would take this, maybe obviously read the bottle and dilute it if you need, but take a rag. This is already diluted. Wet the rag, and then same as with the duster, you just go and wipe every leaf. And the Leaf Tech can actually be a good way to remove pests. If you notice something on the plant, like I was saying earlier, mealybugs, spider mites, anything like that, if you actually physically remove the pest from the plant, you're doing worlds of difference to the plant. And if you are vigilant on it and you check every couple days or so and just keep the pests off, they won't have a chance to thrive and take over. If the plant is growing happy, you might want to do either of these things. The first one involves using some twisty ties. We like to use these Vigoro plant ties. What you can do is you can actually shape the plant and tie different branches together. So let's say you take this one up here and one of these back here, and you tie them together, and then you do the same with this one over here and this one over here, and you can get it to be nice and vertical. Or if you want it to spread or grow attached to a wall or something like that, you can actually anchor it to something else and pull the stem down like this, and then what the plant will do is it'll start growing out and back up again. The most advanced tip I can give for you is if it's growing happy and it's got all this growth up here, but you want to force a little growth down here, what we actually did, and I'll show you up close in a second, is you cut a little notch. So take your pruners or even scissors or a razor blade. Again, make sure they're clean. And what you do is you cut a little 1-inch section from the stem and almost like a 1-inch patch. And then you chip away at it and remove that from the bark. It's called air layering. And what's going to happen is the plant's going to say, oh, I got to this point, and that's where the nutrients stop transferring, and it's going to spur new growth from that point and shoot out a whole new stem. So if you follow these tips and you really do care about your plant, I mean, check it every week, figure out what is happening with it, what it needs, and show it some love, you and your fiddle leaf can grow into plant heroes together. If you like this video, drop some fertilizer on that like button, subscribe for more future content, and if you have any friends or family or anyone you know that could benefit from this, go ahead and share it over to them, because the more we teach each other, the more we can all grow together.